Imagine for a moment that you are in the midst of the wildest nature, with nothing but your bare hands. No tents, no weapons, no means to defend yourself. Just you, your mind, and the desperate need to survive. Now imagine that you manage to create something that changes everything. A simple stone point tied to a stick. It may seem like little, right? But that simple invention was the moment that forever changed the fate of humanity. More than 300,000 years ago, our ancestors were not the top predators on the planet. We didn't have sharp claws like tigers, fangs like lions, or the speed of cheetahs. We were practically defenseless in a world full of deadly dangers. But we had something no other animal possessed: the ability to imagine, to create, to turn simple objects into powerful tools. The first human weapon was not the result of mere chance. It was the product of thousands of years of observation, experimentation, and the sheer necessity to survive. Our ancestors saw how sharp sticks could pierce, how stones could cut, and how by combining both elements they could create something much more powerful than either one alone. This is the story of how a simple stone tip tied to a stick became humanity's first weapon and changed the course of our species forever. It's the story of how human ingenuity triumphed over the most brutal nature. But to understand the importance of this first weapon, we need to transport ourselves to a world completely different from the one we know. 300,000 years ago, Earth was a dangerous place where humans were at the bottom of the food chain. Our ancestors lived in a constant state of alert. Every day was a struggle to get food without becoming food for something larger and fiercer. Large predators dominated the landscape: massive lions, bear-sized hyenas, and saber-toothed cats that could slice a human in half with little effort. Hunting was practically impossible with bare hands. The larger animals were too dangerous to attack directly, and the smaller ones were too quick to catch. Our ancestors primarily relied on scavenging, waiting for the large predators to finish eating before they could feed on the remains. But even obtaining carrion was risky. They had to compete with hyenas, vultures, and other scavengers, and there was always the danger that the original predator would return while they were eating. It was a precarious existence where every meal could be their last. Shelter was also a constant challenge. Without the right tools, building safe shelters was nearly impossible. Our ancestors had to make do with natural caves, which were not always available. Often they slept outside, vulnerable to any nighttime predators. Mortality was incredibly high. Few humans reached adulthood, and those who did rarely lived past their 30s. It was a world where survival depended more on luck than anything else. In this brutal context, the need to find some advantage was desperate. Our ancestors knew that something had to change, or the human species would go extinct like so many others that had disappeared before. If this story is exciting you as much as it excites me, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to keep discovering the most amazing moments in human history. The turning point came when some of our ancestors began to experiment with the idea of combining different materials. It wasn't a process that happened overnight, but rather the result of generations of observation and trial and error. It all began with observing nature. Our ancestors noticed that sharp branches could pierce better than dull ones, that sharp stones cut better than smooth ones, and that certain materials were harder than others. But the real breakthrough came when someone had the brilliant idea of combining these elements. The first spear was probably quite simple, a long, straight branch with the tip hardened by fire. But this had its limitations. Wood, while useful, wore out quickly and wasn't hard enough to penetrate the thick hides of large animals. Then came the revolution. Someone had the idea of taking a sharp stone and securely tying it to the end of a stick. This simple combination created something entirely new. The hardness of the stone combined with the length of the stick produced a tool that was much more powerful than either component alone. But doing this was not as easy as it sounds. Our ancestors had to learn to select the right stones, to shape them appropriately, and to find a way to tie them to the stick so they wouldn't come loose at the critical moment. This required knowledge of different materials, carving techniques, and tying methods. The first attempts were likely disastrous. Tips that came loose at the moment of the hunt, sticks that broke on impact, and bindings that failed when they were needed most. But with each failure, they learned something new. Each mistake brought them closer to the perfect solution. Gradually, they developed more sophisticated techniques. They learned to notch the sticks so that the tips fit better. They discovered that certain types of plant fibers and animal tendons worked better as bindings. They even devised techniques to make the point sharper and more durable. The first stone-tipped spear was more than a tool. It was a declaration that humans would no longer accept being passive victims in a hostile world. It was the first step towards becoming the dominant predators on the planet. Once they had the first functional spear, everything changed dramatically. For the first time in history, humans had a real advantage over other animals. They were no longer just scavengers waiting for leftovers. They could actively hunt. The spear gave them reach. They could strike at animals from a safe distance without having to get close enough for claws or teeth to reach them. This greatly reduced the risk of death during hunting and allowed more hunters to survive to hunt another day. The spear also gave early humans the ability to penetrate. The sharp stone tip could pierce the thick hides of animals that were previously impossible to hunt. Mammoths, bison, woolly rhinoceroses, all of these giants were now within reach of human hunters. But the spear was more than just a hunting tool. It was also a means of defense. For the first time, humans could effectively protect themselves from predators. A well-handled spear could keep at bay a saber-toothed cat or a giant bear, giving the human the chance to escape or even win the fight. The psychological impact was immense. Our ancestors no longer felt powerless. They gained confidence in their ability to source food and protect their families. This newfound confidence led to a greater willingness to explore new territories and tackle new challenges. Group hunting became significantly more effective. A band of humans armed with spears could work together to corner and take down animals much larger than themselves. They developed sophisticated tactics like surrounding animals, setting ambushes, and coordinating simultaneous attacks. The spear also reshaped social organization. The most skilled hunters with the spear naturally became leaders. The techniques for crafting spears became valuable knowledge passed down from generation to generation. The first specialists emerged, individuals dedicated specifically to making the best spearheads. The abundance of meat provided by spear hunting allowed human groups to grow. More food meant more survivors, and more survivors meant more hands to work, more brains to think, and more opportunities for innovation. Can you see how a simple tool changed everything? If you want to keep learning these fascinating stories about the origins of humanity, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. But the spear was not just an individual tool, it became the centerpiece of a complete social and technological revolution. Its creation required specialized knowledge, group cooperation, and teaching systems that forever transformed how our ancestors lived. Making an effective spear required multiple skills. First, one needed to know how to select the right wood, not too soft to break easily, nor too hard to work with. Then, knowledge of carving techniques was necessary to create sharp and durable stone tips. Understanding binding materials and tying techniques was also essential. All this knowledge could not be mastered by just one person. The first specialists emerged. Some became experts in selecting and preparing wood, others in shaping stone tips, and others in binding techniques. This specialization marked the beginning of the division of labor, a fundamental concept in the development of civilization. The transmission of knowledge became critical. Techniques for making effective spears had to be passed down from parents to children, from teachers to apprentices. This gave rise to the first structured teaching systems. Young people no longer learned solely by imitation, but received specific instruction on the best techniques. The spear also altered gender dynamics within human groups. While both men and women participated in spear making, large game hunting became primarily a male activity. This was not due to physical superiority, but rather a strategic division of labor. Women specialized in equally important tasks, such as gathering, childcare, and making smaller tools. Trade began to develop. Groups living near quality flint deposits started exchanging their spearheads for other materials and products. This created the first trade networks of humanity, connecting groups living hundreds of miles apart. The spear even influenced language development. It was necessary to communicate complex techniques for crafting, coordinate hunting strategies, and plan expeditions. This led to the development of a richer vocabulary and more complex linguistic structures. Can you imagine what your life would be like if you had to make your own tools to survive? Do you think you would have the patience and skill to create something as complex as an effective spear? As spear-making techniques refined, innovations emerged that further enhanced their effectiveness. Our ancestors did not settle for the first functional version. They continued to experiment and improve their designs. One of the earliest improvements was the development of different tip types for various purposes. Broad, heavy tips were better for hunting large animals, while thin, sharp tips were more effective for small, fast creatures. They even developed specialized tips for fishing, with barbs that prevented the fish from escaping. Carving techniques also evolved. The first spear makers learned to apply pressure and percussion more precisely, creating sharper and more durable tips. They developed specialized tools for carving, such as bone hammers and stone chisels. Binding materials became more sophisticated. They experimented with different types of plant fibers, animal tendons, and even strips of leather. Each material had its advantages. Plant fibers were flexible but degraded in moisture. Tendons were strong but rigid, and leather was durable but challenging to work with. The first hardening techniques emerged. They learned that hardening the wooden tip with fire could create more effective spears. Later on, they developed methods to treat stone tips with natural resins, making them more impact-resistant. Ergonomics also improved. They realized that the thickness, length, and balance of the spear affected its effectiveness. They developed techniques to make spears lighter, yet equally strong, and to balance them so they were easier to handle. They even innovated in usage techniques. They developed different throwing styles for different situations: overhead throws for large animals, side throws for moving targets, and thrusting techniques for close combat. These innovations didn't happen overnight. Each improvement was the result of years of experimentation, trial and error, and knowledge sharing. Gradually, spears became more effective, durable, and versatile. Isn't it amazing how our ancestors never stopped innovating? If this story fascinates you, share the video with your friends and help us reach more people. And the impact of the spear on human evolution was much deeper than we might imagine. It not only changed the way we hunted and defended ourselves, but also influenced our physical, mental, and social development in ways that we can still observe today. Physically, the use of spears favored the development of certain human characteristics. Hunters who could throw with more accuracy and strength were more successful, which meant these traits were passed down to future generations. This contributed to the development of broader shoulders, stronger arms, and better hand-eye coordination. Mentally, the crafting and use of spears stimulated the development of the human brain. Planning a hunt, coordinating group strategies, and making complex tools required advanced cognitive abilities. This fostered the growth of larger and more complex brains. The spear also influenced the development of language. The need to communicate complex manufacturing techniques, coordinate hunting strategies, and pass on specialized knowledge led to the development of a richer vocabulary and more complex grammatical structures. Socially, the spear laid the groundwork for the hierarchical organization of human societies. Skillful hunters became natural leaders, and the most skilled spearmakers gained special status. This established the first social class systems based on specialized skills. The spear also changed humans' relationship with the environment. For the first time, humans became dominant predators, capable of hunting animals much larger than themselves. This gave them access to new food sources and allowed them to expand into new habitats. Economically, the spear was the foundation of early trading systems. Groups that made the best spears could exchange them for other goods, creating the first trade networks of humanity. Culturally, the spear became a symbol of power and status. Hunting rituals, initiation ceremonies, and warrior traditions developed around the spear. It even appeared in primitive art, highlighting its importance in daily life. Have you ever wondered how a simple tool could have such a profound impact on our evolution? What other innovations do you think were equally important for human development? When we reflect on this incredible story, we realize that the first human spear represents much more than just a tool. It was the moment humanity demonstrated its unique ability to transform the world through ingenuity and creativity. The spear teaches us that human innovation doesn't arise from comfort, but from necessity. It was the harshest conditions that forced our ancestors to think differently, experiment with new ideas, and create groundbreaking solutions. This lesson is still relevant today as we face our own global challenges. It also highlights the importance of cooperation and shared knowledge. The spear wasn't invented by a single brilliant individual. It was the outcome of generations of collective experimentation, gradual improvements, and knowledge transmission. This reminds us that significant advancements in humanity are always community efforts. The story of the spear teaches us about the importance of specialization and division of labor. When humans began to develop specialized skills in spearmaking, they laid the foundations for all the complex societies that followed. This shows us that specialization is not just efficiency, but progress. It also reminds us that technology is not neutral. The spear fundamentally changed the relationship between humans and the natural world, turning us from prey into predators. This teaches us about the importance of using technology responsibly and being aware of its consequences. The spear also emphasizes the significance of passing down knowledge. The techniques for making spears were passed down from generation to generation, consistently improving. This reminds us that we are heirs to thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, and we have the responsibility to preserve and enhance it. Finally, the story of the spear teaches us that humanity has always been innovative. From the earliest hunters to modern engineers, we have been a species that never accepts limitations as definitive. We constantly seek ways to improve, overcome obstacles, and create solutions to the problems we face. The first human spear was not just a tool, it was a declaration that humans would not settle for being victims of circumstance. It was the first step on a journey that took us from caves to the stars, and that journey continues today. And so, brothers and sisters, a simple stone tip fastened to a stick became humanity's first weapon and forever changed the course of our history. In a world where humans were prey, our ancestors refused to accept their fate and created the tool that would turn them into the planet's dominant predators. The spear teaches us that human greatness lies not in our physical strength, but in our capacity to imagine, create, and innovate. It reminds us that every great advance of humanity started with someone who refused to accept limitations and chose to create something better. As we look to the future and face our own challenges, we can draw inspiration from our ancestors. They showed us that there is no problem that cannot be solved with ingenuity, cooperation, and determination. If they could transform the world with a simple stone tip, we can face any challenges that come our way. The next time you see a modern tool, remember that it all began with that first spear. Every innovation we enjoy today is the result of thousands of years of humans, like our ancestors, who refused to accept limitations and chose to create something better. The first human weapon wasn't just a survival tool, it was the first step toward becoming the architects of our own destiny. And that incredible journey continues to this day.